Two people in the Bible never died. Elijah was taken up in a fiery chariot to heaven, and Enoch walked with God. Then he was no more because God took him away. Welcome to the Word for 2021. Enoch was not always someone that walked with God. This is what it says in chapter 5 of Genesis, beginning in verse 21. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. And after he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived 365 years. Enoch walked with God. Then he was no more because God took him away. When Enoch became the father of Methuselah, he was 65 years of age. It could have been as he was holding his first son, his firstborn, in his hands, looking down at that little child. He might have been overwhelmed with the responsibility and with the accountability of being a father. He might have been thinking to himself, what kind of influence will I have on this child? What kind of character will this child have? How can I build into this child? And then he knew I needed help, and God was his helper. And at that moment, he began walking with God. Now, Enoch was the father of Methuselah. Methuselah was the father of Lamech, and Lamech was the father of Noah. This was pre-flood. During Noah's day, it says that wickedness was great on the earth. Every inclination of men's hearts was only evil all the time. That doesn't happen in just a generation, but there's always a progression of sin before it gets to that point. So during the time of Enoch, he was probably living in a culture that was godless, in a culture that did not follow God and did not seek after God. But in the midst of that generation, Enoch walked with God. After becoming the father of Methuselah, he walked with God again, it says. In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 5, it says of Enoch that he pleased God. And without faith, it's impossible to please God. So Enoch was pleasing God because he was walking by faith in a faithless time in the world. Enoch, because he walked by faith, was not conformed to the world. Enoch, because he walked by faith and pleased God, he was not controlled by the world, and he was not condemned with the world. It is possible to live a godly life in the midst of a godless situation and circumstance. It says that Enoch walked with God. What does that mean? It first means that he had a desire, a true desire to be with God. You can't walk with God if you don't really want to. You have to walk with God because that is your heart's desire. And his heart's desire was to be in God's presence and to be with him. It also implies progress in growth. Enoch was not perfect. He was still a sinful person. So he had good days and bad days. He had ups and he had downs, but there was progress in his life. He was growing closer to God as he continued to walk with God. That sounds just like our day today. And it also implies that he had a right relationship with God. Amos chapter 3, verse 3 says, "Can two walk together unless they be agreed?" Enoch was believing God. He was walking with God because he was in agreement with God. Finally, he walked with God. He walked in faith. He pleased God. It's impossible to please God without faith. Therefore, he believed God and he trusted God. I love what one person said. The only way to live is to die daily. A.W. Tozer put it this way: Enoch's daily walk was a walk of faith, a walk of fellowship with God. If Enoch could walk and live with God by faith in the midst of a sinful generation, we should be able to follow his example because the human race is the same and God is the same. Enoch was known as a man who walked with God. May that be said of you and be said of me, that we walked with God. Thank you for being part of the Word for 2021.